questions about what is going on in East Palestine. We've tried throughout this to continue to inform the public, everyone, but most particularly the people who are directly affected. So today I brought many members of our team together to talk about the current monitoring that is that's underway, and to really answer any outstanding questions that may still be out there. Today I have experts from the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, the Ohio Department of Health, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, the Ohio Department of Agriculture, Ohio Department of Public Safety, the Ohio Emergency Management Agency, the Ohio Department of Transportation, and the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. They're all in the room with me today. Let me go back to February 3rd, 8:55 p.m. when the train wreck occurred. While traveling through East Palestine on Friday night, February 3rd, a Norfolk Southern train derailed, causing a massive fire. Around 50 railroad cars were impacted by the crash, including 10 that were hauling hazardous materials. In addition to the fire, there was also serious environmental concerns. U.S. EPA and the Ohio EPA worked to slow the flow of contaminated water, while firefighters worked to extinguish the blaze. By that Sunday, 2 days later, concerns began to arise in regard to the temperature in one of the cars. I was on a conference call that night around 7:30 when that information was first given to me. Based on the conversations that I was hearing and information, it was clear that more assistance was needed in East Palestine, and so I activated the Ohio National Guard to go there, which they did very, very quickly. I was also informed on that call about the car where the temperature was described as very volatile, and at that moment was in fact rising. The fear was that this car might explode, sending deadly shrapnel in all directions. The next morning, I traveled to East Palestine. I met with those on the ground, those who had been working, those who represented the railroad, as well as the federal government. It was clear at that point that we were faced with two bad options. One option was to do nothing and wait for the car to explode. I had a discussion with the representatives of the railroad, extended discussion. I brought Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro in that through my cell phone, and we went back and forth for a couple hours, trying to just weigh the risk, one versus the other. The risk of the car exploding was described to me as high probability that it could explode. And when I pressed everyone to give me the information about, and also give Governor Shapiro the information, she was on the cell phone listening and asking questions, it came back that the concern was that this would be what was described as a catastrophic explosion of the car, which would result in shrapnel going out up to close to a mile. We also looked at what the danger was from a controlled release, which is what the railroad felt should be done. Again, Governor Shapiro and I spent considerable time, up to about 2 hours, as I recall, asking a lot of questions about how that would take place. We had the benefit of the Ohio National Guard that had done a modeling exercise. They did that in conjunction with the U.S. Defense Department, who gave them some additional information and help in regard to the modeling. The modeling was then produced into a map, I believe, that we showed everyone that day when we had a press conference. There was a red area that they described as the likelihood of death within that red area would be very high. There's an area outside that, the yellow area, where they also described it would be very dangerous to be there, but not quite as dangerous as it was within the red area. We then made the decision to go ahead with the second option, which was the controlled release. As that was being prepared to be done, we sent back law enforcement into those zones, the red zone and the yellow zone, for the third time to literally knock on doors. And they described how they did it to me. They did it in very loud, did everything they could do to get, if there's anyone left in that house, to get their attention to come out. That was the third time that those houses, I believe, had been contacted. The individuals in those houses had been contacted. The controlled release did it in fact occur. It was, to my understanding, delayed a little bit. There was actually, when we at 3 o'clock, release was supposed to be at 3:30. We wanted to get everybody out of there. We had members of the Guard and the patrol and others who had the area cordoned off. We told them to leave there at 3 o'clock. Unfortunately, there was a couple of cars that came in, and they had to go get them out of that impacted area, or what would be an impacted area. So the release occurred, as I recall, about 4:15, 4:20, and we were monitoring the air outside that area, and the air continued to be good. Fast forward to the time when we opened it back up a couple of days later. We had sent in members of the Ohio National Guard and had their protective suits on to measure the air. And no one went back within that area or was allowed back in that area until they could come back and tell us that the monitoring was consistently good. In fact, the monitoring showed that the air was basically what it was prior to the actual train crash, what we would have expected it to be at that time. People were then let back in. Our environmental teams remain in East Palestine, where they're working directly with the railroad and others to ensure that the site is thoroughly cleaned up with no shortcuts. This morning, I called Alan Shaw, CEO of Norfolk Southern. He and I have had contact numerous times since the crash. I discussed with him many of the concerns that we're hearing from residents of East Palestine. I asked him directly if he would personally guarantee that the railroad would stay there until absolutely everything was cleaned up. He gave me his word and his commitment that the railroad would do that. They would not leave until that was done. I might also mention that I received a call from President Biden earlier last week. He told me that he wanted just to assure me that anything I needed from the federal government, they would supply, and told me to call him personally if there was anything that we needed at any point. I told the president that I appreciated the work that we had received so far from the U.S. EPA. I also told him that I appreciated the help that the Defense Department gave the Ohio National Guard in regard to the modeling. That it was very, very helpful, and I expressed my gratitude for that. Let me also say that J.D. Vance and Congressman Johnson have been in touch with me. In fact, I just talked to both of them a moment ago again. They've expressed their interest in doing anything that needs to be done. I know Senator Brown has as well. And let me just now talk about something that I did learn today, which I think does impact Congress. I learned today from the PUCO, Ohio's PUCO, that this train was not considered high hazardous material train. Let me repeat this. This train apparently was not considered a high hazardous material train. Therefore, the railroad was not required to notify anyone here in Ohio about what was in the rail cars coming through our state. I would think that the members of Congress, and I would ask them to take a look at this. Even though some rail cars did have hazardous material on board, and while most of them did not, that's why it was not categorized as a high hazardous material train. Frankly, if this is true, and I'm told it's true, this is absurd, and we need to look at this, and Congress needs to take a look at how these things are handled. We should know when we have trains carrying hazardous material that are going through the state of Ohio. So I ask Congress to take a look at this and again see what they can find out, and if those facts as I related them are true, to take the appropriate action. So let me now get down to sharing the information that we have. Let me just state again, we will continue to do this. We're not leaving either. We're not leaving at East Palestine until everything is done. And we have, as I indicated, a number of agencies from the state of Ohio that have been involved, and they will continue to be involved as we move forward. Let me now ask Mary Mertz, the director of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, to come up. I think Steve Gray was going to come up as well and discuss the question about the dead fish. I know that people have been seeing the dead fish. They want to know what is going on, whether that is continuing to be a problem. And I've asked the director of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources to talk about that and talk about some of the streams that are in fact impacted. From there, we will go, and I will introduce her in a moment, but a representative from the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency who will also talk about the water quality, and we'll move from there to the water and to the air. Director Mertz.
So I wanted to start off to give you just a little bit of context about the waterways we're talking about, where they are and how the water flowed. So I think Steve's going to help me out here. So the initial water impact was at Sulphur Run. Were you able to, can you find that on there, or do we need to use the map in your hand?
So it'll be up here.
So above this map, but we have a smaller map here. The initial impact was at Sulphur Run, leading down into Leslie Run to Bull Creek, and then a portion of the North Fork of Beaver Creek. So essentially, so for our purposes, we looked at 4 different waterways over a space of about 7.5 miles and what the environmental impacts were on those streams and tributaries.
I mentioned, Director, what's beyond that as we move towards the Ohio Road?
So the North Fork of Beaver Creek leads into Beaver Creek, which I'm lost. I mean, we eventually get down there.
So,
Yeah, the Beaver Creek does go directly into the Ohio River. Yeah, go for it.
so the North Fork of Beaver Creek goes into the main stem of Little Beaver Creek, which is a state scenic river, and then that flows into the Ohio River.
So that's the essential geography we were looking at for this. And, the Department of Natural Resources, part of our mission is to preserve and improve Ohio's biodiversity. So our concern in this case was what was happening with the aquatic wildlife. And what we have discovered through the testing and sampling that's been done is that very early on, we have estimated, based on our sampling and modeling, about 3,500 dead fish across that space, across those streams, tributaries, waterways, 12 different species, The good news is that none of those species are threatened or endangered, but that is still a loss of wildlife, so of concern. Especially when we reach the Beaver Creek, this state wild and scenic river, where we are especially protective of what we have there. So some of the species, creek chub, mottled sculpin, stone roller, I think we have some pictures somewhere of what those are, but 12 different species, none threatened or endangered, but still a loss of life all the same. The one species we will be looking for, we have no evidence yet that any have died, but this is really an area of focus for hellbenders, which are federal and state endangered. And so we will be doing some monitoring in the months to come to see if any of them did die in the initial release into the waterways. So good news, there doesn't appear to be any increase in the fish or aquatic creatures killed since the first couple days of the derailment. So wildlife officers have been there every day on the scene, working with contractors who are in the water, doing the net sampling, making the estimates, and we will continue to monitor and watch what's going on and eventually hold those responsible accountable for the loss of wildlife in the area. We don't have any evidence of non-aquatic species suffering from the derailment. Haven't had any concerns about that, not only here, but we also communicate with the Pennsylvania Game Commission as well, and they haven't heard about that either. So that is essentially where we are with the Department of Natural Resources, and I think the governor.
Director, thank you. Thank you very much. She'll be available for questions. Let me invite now Tiffany Cavalack from the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency to come to the microphone. We have on the screen from East Palestine, Kurt Kohler. Kurt, you may remember at our previous two press conferences was available and discussed what the situation was. We're asking them to tell us the very latest measurements coming from the site.
Thank you, Governor. Hello, I'm Tiffany Cavalack. I'm the Chief of the Division of Surface Water at Ohio EPA. And speaking of the derailment on February 3rd, we speak that it occurred at the location of Sulphur Run, and Norfolk and Southern are actively aerating Sulphur Run and have containment within the 1.3 miles that Sulphur Run leads into Leslie Run. Sulphur Run remains contaminated, but we're confident that it is contained. Data from February 4th, the day after the train derailment, down gradient on Leslie Run and Norfolk Little Beaver Creek showed very low detection levels of contaminants and mostly from fire residual chemicals. Data from February 10th, more recently, showed low levels of only two contaminants, butyl acrylate and ethyl hexyl acrylate, both are volatile organic chemicals, in Leslie Run, the one that's directly below Sulphur Run. The butyl acrylate dissipates to non-detectable levels once it gets to the North Fork of the Little Beaver Creek. And the other one, ethyl hexyl acrylate, dissipates to non-detectable levels once we get to Little Beaver Creek. We have not detected any vinyl chloride in any of the down gradient waterways. Both the February 4th and the February 10th data are available now on Ohio EPA's website that's titled East Palestine's Train Derailment. The spill did flow to the Ohio River during that initial slug, but the Ohio River is very large, and it's a water body that's able to dilute the pollutants pretty quickly. Ohio EPA and other state agencies have been working with the Ohio River Valley Water Sanitation Commission, some may know as ORSENCO, to track the contaminant plume in real time. It's moving at about a mile an hour. ORSENCO's tracking allows for potential closing of drinking water intakes to allow the majority of the chemicals to pass. This strategy, along with drinking water treatment, like oxidation and advanced treatment like activated carbon are both effective at addressing these contaminants and helps ensure the safety of the drinking water supplies. So we're pretty confident that these low levels are not getting passed on to the customers. Would you like me to pass it to Kurt?
Let me ask you one question.
Yes.
You might explain, you talked about the containment, what steps were taken to contain it in that initial spill area?
Yes, and I think that's why we have, I think Kurt
Okay,
can.
Kurt, do that.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Want me to answer that, Governor?
You want to answer that, Kurt, and then you can kind of give us a report from East Palestine.
Okay, I'll be glad to. Thank you, sir. And we're, again, you're hearing the results. You heard us speak about it before. At the beginning of the spill, we were on a defensive posture, as the governor kind of talked about. It was safety first. You had to attack from the outside in. Since the conditions have changed and removal of the threats from the rail cars, the cleanup in the emergency phase has been on the offensive. Not only with multiple containment points and in situ treatment in Sulphur Run, work with Norfolk Southern and our other partners, kind of as a management plan for this cleanup. Again, the emergency phase, where we targeted 3 sites, or we used 3 different names for it. We have the wreckage area where the cars are still being staged. We have Pleasant Road, where we do know we have gross contamination present on the ground and still in the 2 ditches. And we have the waterways. The waterways have been targeted and our concern from the onset of this. We did get initial dams, dirt dumped into the creek to stop the flow, or the booms, the oil containment booms, to stop the floating product. From that point in time, we did use very tried and true methods, but we've been able to build those up. Aeration and sparging units that increase the efficiency of the breaking down of the dissolved phase of the contaminants present. We do. Again, Sulphur Run, we have it contained. It is our control area. We're confident that the materials getting out of there and extending down into Leslie Run are good. There is residual material in Leslie Run. That's some of the explanation why there is still some of the detections. We do have aeration in Leslie Run. Back into the site, like at Pleasant Road, where the butyl car did release material along with the vinyl chloride burn areas, there has been active excavation of those grossly contaminated soils. 2 ditches that run parallel to the tracks, North Ditch and South Ditch, would both drain into Sulphur Run, have been blocked off. The water that naturally flows in there from the wetland is being pumped around so we don't augment any contamination and continue to push high levels of contaminants downstream. And then excavation of that material has already begun. The center line of the track where butyl acrylate was puddled along with vinyl chloride residues is actively being excavated. It is a constant source reduction, again, with the target of moving over into the remediation phase. We're trying to get rid of, again, the high level gross contamination. Ohio EPA's emergency response, along with other support from our multiple divisions, have boots on the ground all day, every day since the onset of this incident. I'm confident that we'll get it to a stage where it's safe to transfer over for remediation.
Thank you very much. Let me ask you one question.
Yes, sir.
And then if you'll stay around, because the media may have some questions for you when we finish.
Yes, sir.
How far along is this removal of dirt? My understanding is they're going down 1 to 3 feet down into the ground, but how far along are they in regard to that?
Current volumes, we have about almost 1 million gallons of water collected and stored in various storage containers on site from a liquid waste standpoint. And then as from the solids, if I remember, there's almost 500 cubic yards of vinyl chloride impacted material. That center line of track is again, emergency response. We do that, there was awareness that there was material on the surface and extending down. The goal of this was to get rid of that highly contaminated, potentially mobile material before we had rain events or something like that that could drive it further down. This initial phase, some of these pits, sir, are now about 700 feet long and about 8 foot deep in some areas. And this main excavation going now there's some stability issues. So I think they're reporting about 4 to 5 feet below ground surface down to a hard packed clay. And that is going all the way from Pleasant Road into where the main derailment occurred. So it'll in the range of 1,000 foot or more.
Do you have any idea what percentage of the work is done yet, roughly?
From the emergency response phase, that's something we're working. We still have our action items, the ditches, the center line. Again, the waterway is primary. It's moving along. I would hope next week a lot of the emergency response phases, high-end daily activities should start to drop off.
Kurt, thank you. Stay on there in case we get questions. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Let me now introduce Dr. Bruce Vanderhoff, the Director of the Ohio Department of Health. He's going to talk about exactly where we are in regard to the air, the water, and everything from the public health point of view. And Dr. Vanderhoff, one of the things I would ask you to address is the odor. I know people are still smelling an odor, and I wonder if you can, comment about that and what the significance of that is.
Thank you, Governor. Let's begin by just talking about the chemicals. And the fact is that for the most part, most of the chemicals that we're worried about and that we're talking about fall into a category known as volatile organic chemicals. And you heard that mentioned before, or compounds. Now, volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, it's important for us to recognize, are actually a part of our everyday life. So if you go this afternoon on your way home to pump gas in your car, you're being exposed to volatile organic compounds. You are. If you are burning wood or natural gas in your home, you're being exposed. And certainly if you are smoking or you live with someone who smokes, you're being exposed to actually fairly substantial levels of volatile organic compounds. Now, the good news is that most people can be around these volatile organic compounds at low levels without really feeling health effects. However, at higher levels, especially over a longer period of time, then we can have longer-term health effects. And that's why there is the concern around these compounds. So the goal from a health point of view in a situation like this is really to make every effort we can to reduce the risk that we're going to take those volatile organic compounds into our bodies. And there are really two paths for that to happen. One is what we breathe, and the other is what we consume. So the effort, as you heard it described, really began at the start with trying to make sure that we had a safe environment as it related to the air that people were breathing. For us as human beings, we've got to breathe. We can't avoid the air. The air is there, we need it, and so it has to be clean, it has to be safe for us. And the good news is, and you heard the governor describe this, by the time we were at the decision point for potentially bringing the people who had evacuated back into the impacted area, we had on hand air testing that told us that the air really looked pretty much like it did before this event ever happened. So that gave us really great confidence when it came to that aspect. But then there's the second aspect. Even after bringing people back, we made it clear that, hey, the next piece of this is your water source. We want to test that. Now, the good news is the majority of people who live in the East Palestine community are in fact on municipal water. And those municipal sources are deep wells that they were able to intentionally reserve using the most distant ones only for feeding the water supply. But nevertheless, there are quite a number of people who are on private water systems, mostly private wells. We have strongly encouraged all of those people on private wells to get their wells tested, and that will be done at no cost to them. This is something that is part of the remediation, and it's very important for the reasons I just described. Now, if you are one of the people who live in the impacted area and have a private water source, you're not on municipal water, I'd encourage you to call a number. I'll read the number out. You've heard it before. It's 330-849-3919 and indicate, I believe I'm in the affected area and I'd like to have my water source checked. Now, we're strongly recommending those who have not yet had their water source checked to use bottled water. And bottled water is being made available again. Same phone number that you can call if you need access to that. This is going to be particularly important if you are pregnant, if you are breastfeeding, or if you're preparing formula for an infant. So we would encourage you to avail yourself of that water. The bottom line is that from the very start of this, we have taken every step possible to assure that people's safety was first and foremost. And that with the compounds that we're talking about, in consultation with experts at the national level, we have first made sure that we were providing a clean atmosphere, clean air, and now we are actively working to assure that people, for the long run, have clean water. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're happy to take any questions for anyone who's talked about.
Hi, Joe Ingles with Ohio Public Radio and Television. My question is, you said that the water is safe, at least the community water that's been tested, but should people maybe think of using water filters like Brita filters, that kind of thing? Is that a good thing to do right now while things are unknown? And should people just go ahead and do bottled water in the meantime?
At this stage in the game, we are recommending that people in the community consider using bottled water. We are awaiting results of testing of the municipal water sources that are going to be fairly detailed and will allow us to have a very complete look at the potential compounds that could be involved. And we expect that very soon. You know, from my point of view, using bottled water for a short period of time is pretty easy to do. And once we have data and information, especially if you have a private water source, look, there are things that we will be able to do. It may be drilling a new well, a deep well instead of a shallow well. It may be using some of the remediation tools that were described for municipal sources that include forms of aeration and charcoal filtering, et cetera. So for right now, I think bottled water is the right answer.
Hi, this is Ashley Bornanson with WBNS. I also have a question for you, Doctor. In terms of that radius of those who should be drinking bottled water, how far does that radius go? Could this impact Central Ohioans? And what could that impact be on the current health of those who might have been intaking this water?
Thank you. So we're very confident about, and there are maps in the that are available in the community of what we believe to be the impacted zone for these wells. And if people call that hotline, they'll be able to access that. For people more distant, I'm going to turn to some of my colleagues from the Ohio EPA to describe again that process of testing. If you're in Central Ohio, this is really not relevant to your water source. If you're actually in most of the rest of Ohio, we're really talking about those who have municipal water sources coming off of the Ohio River And I'm absolutely confident that Orsenco and the local communities, along with Ohio EPA and US EPA, are using every appropriate caution to assure that there's no public health impact.
So then we'll do the Ohio River again.
Sure.
Important.
Yes, it is important. We know that there is a plume moving down the Ohio River. So all of our neighboring states, state departments, and Orsenco are in constant communication about the location of the plume. We think it's on its way around Huntsville or Huntington, West Virginia now. And so all of those water systems are in constant communication on when it may be at their intake, and they're either shutting down and or using the treatment available that they have on site. So we think that's the only southern part of the exposure that there might be from the site.
For that second part, could there be any health effects of those who have already intaken that water?
We're seeing very low levels of contaminants, and so all of the treatment being done at those water systems take out any contamination before it finished water. So I can't envision that there would be any risk that has already occurred from the drinking water systems on the Ohio River.
I have questions about water as well. So, I'm Nick Evans with the Ohio Capital Journal. I just want to make sure that I understand what you laid out. Okay, so it goes Sulphur Run, Leslie Run, Beaver Creek, Ohio River, correct? North Fork, yeah. Okay. So you said that sulfur is contaminated, but you think it's contained. Leslie, no vinyl chloride, but ethyl butyl and ethyl hexyl. Okay.
Yes.
What's in the plume?
That was the initial slug that we talked about that were the fire combustion chemicals that we detected that are showing up. We have data that's on we showed hundreds of detections on that initial slug that went through into the Ohio River, but they're no longer being seen in the smaller tributaries except for those two chemicals.
Okay. So in the plume, though, it's just the ethyl hexyl and the
In the Ohio River?
Yeah.
Honestly, there's probably, it's the fire contaminant combustion materials. It's not free product per se. It's volatile organic compounds. There could be multiple, but not necessarily just the remaining two that we're seeing in the smaller. That makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, you're welcome.
You want to talk about the dilution at that point? In the Ohio River, what are you seeing in the Ohio River?
So very, very low levels of volatile organic compounds in the Ohio River itself. Probably it helps that it has been very diluted, and we don't expect any higher concentrations to follow than the initial onset of the plume that we're tracking. You're welcome.
Follow up on the plume. When you mentioned the fire combustion materials, are there concerns about PFAS and similar contamination?
So we have not yet tested for the PFAS compounds. We are working with the local EMA to start testing the PFAS compounds, I think, in the drinking water specifically.
Hi, Jeremy Pelzer with Cleveland.com. There have been anecdotal reports in the media of people around East Palestine suffering headaches, other health problems like sore throat, et cetera. And then in addition, other anecdotal reports about animals dying like chickens and cats. Have you been able to substantiate any of these? And what do you think, if these are true, are causing these?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. Anecdotes are challenging because they are anecdotes. Couple of things. First of all, for many of the compounds that go on the list of volatile organic compounds, we can smell them at levels that are well below the levels that are considered unsafe. So it is possible that at a very, very low level, you can still smell a volatile organic compound. So I don't discount that. In terms of some of the symptoms of headache, et cetera. Unfortunately, volatile organic compounds share with a host of other things the ability to cause very common symptoms at the lower levels. So headache, eye irritation, nose irritation, et cetera. I think that we have to look at the measured facts. And the measured facts include the fact that the air sampling in that area really is not pointing toward an air source for this. And secondly, in terms of water, we're encouraging people to use bottled water, particularly if they're on a private water source. Now, could somebody have a private water source that could be contaminated and we haven't tested it yet? Well, it's a voluntary program and that is possible. I would encourage them to make a switch immediately. Remember with these compounds, it's not, in most circumstances, just about a single small exposure. It's an equation of concentration over duration. The higher the concentration, the longer the duration, the greater the risk. Everything that we've gathered thus far is really pointing toward very low measurements, if at all. And what I would encourage people who are having those symptoms to do is, number one, contact your medical provider. And number two, call the local hotline to let them know that you're experiencing this so a team can get out and check their environment.
Governor, I don't want both of my fellow members of the committee here to get over there. Senator Vance was on Fox News critical of the Biden administration, and even some Democrats have been critical of the Biden administration response. Are you satisfied with the Biden administration response? And is there anything you'd like to see more out of the administration as far as help with this?
Look, our Ohio EPA works with the US EPA. These are the principal people involved. The federal government is conducting an investigation to determine why this wreck occurred, this crash occurred. We await that. And certainly we'll be interested in seeing what was going on. Look, the president called me and said, anything you need. I have not called him back after that conversation. I will not hesitate to do that if we're seeing a problem or anything, but I'm not seeing it.
Patrick Rosakis with the AP. It's probably a question for ODNR. I know you had mentioned that there weren't any maybe like reports of animals dying because of the controlled release. But again, we have been hearing anecdotes from people in the area about pets or other agricultural animals. What can they do if they believe that their animal died because of this? And like, what is ODNR doing to measure that?
Yeah, I think that's probably.
Director of Agriculture, Brian Baldridge.
Thank you, Governor DeWine, and thank you for that question as far as the livestock community. From the agricultural, from Department of Ag standpoint, we've been in contact with folks in the community as far as the veterinarians. Our state vet, Dr. Summers, has been in contact with folks in that community. And that's what we're telling folks. If you see symptoms of your livestock, reach out to your local vet. But we are in constant contact with them and also our stakeholders, Farm Bureau, OSU Extension, all the folks in that community. And to this date, there's nothing that we've seen in the livestock community that causes any concerns to this date. Thank you.
Karen Kassler, State House News Bureau, Ohio Public Radio and Television. Governor, this is for you. You've said that you fully expect Norfolk Southern to pay all the costs. You said you've gotten a commitment from them that they are going to stay on site till everything's cleaned up. Are you confident that they are going to pay all those costs? And there are reports of people having trouble even cashing these inconvenience checks. What do you tell those folks?
Well, look, Norfolk Southern is responsible for this problem. We fully expect them to live up to what the CEO committed to me, and that is that they will pay for everything. If they don't, we've got an attorney general here and that will file a lawsuit. So, look, they're responsible for this. They did it. This is the impact on this community is huge. Not just the physical problem might be caused, but the inconvenience, the terror, many things. So yes, we've already seen lawsuits filed. I'm sure there'll be more lawsuits filed. But my objective is to do everything we can to get this cleaned up as quickly as we can. And I think by continuing to talk and reveal what we're doing, what the testing is showing, I hope that people will continue to have confidence in what's going on. But I understand people's skepticism, and I understand their anger. And if I lived in the community, I would be angry too. The railroad caused this problem. They're going to be held accountable.
Hi, Anna Hoffman, WCMH TV. I know there's going to be a full investigation into how or why this happened, but are there any early indications pointing to deliberate actions to make this train derailment?
I have no indication of that.
About these $1,000 convenience checks, as far as you know, does receiving one of those checks absolve the railroad responsibility? What strings are attached to these checks for you to receive those? You know anything about that?
But I don't think that resolves them of any, or absolves them, of any responsibility. They're still responsible for any damage that they've caused.
For online questions.
All right, we'll go to the online questions.
Hi. Hi, yeah, this is Matthew Cunningham Cook with The Lever. Just wondering who besides Norfolk Southern was consulted on in this decision to do controlled release? Was there independent information collected by either the state of Ohio or the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that allowed you to make a decision about the controlled release independent of what was being provided to you by Norfolk Southern?
As I indicated, we consulted. The Ohio National Guard was consulting directly with the Defense Department. The modeling was very important. We wanted to know exactly what the ramifications of the modeling would be, or of the explosion would be. So yes, we reached out to every expert that we could find.
Next question comes from Craig Cheatham, WCPO.
Good afternoon. I just want to mostly make sure that I'm understanding what several of the speakers have said. One mentioned that the contamination, the so-called plume, is moving at about a mile an hour. I want to make sure that that is correct, and that right now it's believed to be in Huntington. And so what I'm asking is, how big of a threat is that plume perceived to be for the communities that are downstream? And how long do you believe it will be until that plume and what's in it reaches Cincinnati, which is the largest city downstream for quite some time? Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your question. It is on its way to Huntington. I don't have the exact mile markers of where it is right now. Orsenko would be able to tell you exactly where that location is at this time. The farther it travels down the Ohio River, the more it is dissipating, the less concentrated the contaminant plume is. So the farther it heads down the Ohio, the much less risk that it is. And we haven't seen a risk even at the most closest points to East Palestine. So we would not envision anything from this point forward impacting any of the further drinking water supplies. And I will say that the Cincinnati water plant themselves have been extraordinarily helpful in tracking the butyl acrylate chemical itself. It was a brand new chemical that we did not have a methodology for, and Cincinnati is performing that analysis for all of the drinking water systems north of the Ohio River.
Next question comes from Megan Lowe with Verify.
Hi, I also have a question for you, Tiffany. One of our readers asked if if the EPA is testing any soil samples following the derailment. Can you speak to that and what the EPA has found so far, if so?
I would like to turn that question over to Kurt Kohler, who's on site.
Yes, that is ongoing. It's twofold. Part of, again, that remediation phase, what's called a geoprobe, which is able to push rods down into the ground, pull soil up from at depth, is ongoing. That is going down both sides, the center line of the track, both sides, all the way through Pleasant Road and beyond the derailment areas east. Separate soil samples have been collected within other areas of the vinyl chloride as part of the characterization and preparation for waste disposal. And again, Norfolk Southern has also taken advantage of the excavation and planning for, again, what would be foreseeable remediation efforts and ongoing collection. So yes, sampling is being done. I know our Division of Surface Water is already preparing work plans are in place for both potential sediment sampling and long-term surface water sampling along the various waterways. So that is in development, yes.
Kind of a layman's question, but I assume that that they will not leave and will not stop removing dirt until they can go in and get samples of what's remaining, and there's no evidence that it's there. Is that right? I mean, they're going to go back in and make sure that when they think they're done, they'll be back in and sample and make sure that there's nothing showing up.
Yes, sir. That's again, two-phase approach. Attack the grossly impacted in the emergency response phase. Get data while you can to build out the long-term remediation plan for both soil, water, other impacted media.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Mike Fairchild, NBC 24 Toledo.
Thank you, Governor, for taking time out today. You earlier in this press conference referred to it was absurd that this train was not considered high hazardous. And it seems that in 2020, the Department of Transportation allowed rules to be laxed, I guess, to allow 100 or more tank cars filled with gallons of liquid petroleum gas, which could be also even more dangerous. What would you say to, you said that Congress needs to change this. Is there something that you can do as a governor to change the way these bomb trains are transported through the state? Thank you.
Yeah, my understanding when we're dealing with the railroad, governor's power is very limited. This is generally a federal government thing that they basically preempt us on the control of the railroads.
Our next question is from Emma Henderson, WKYC in Cleveland. Emma, are you there? All right, we'll move on to Courtney DeGeorge with Fox News.
Hi, this is for everybody at the press conference, but there's been a lot of people who live in the area who have expressed concern about going back into their homes despite being told that the air is safe and the water is safe. Can you just speak a little bit to the validity of some of their concerns that people are getting headaches and what that might mean in terms of long-term effects that this will have on their bodies? Should they be concerned about potential cancer clusters that might arise as a result years down the line? And also, Governor, if you were to live in the area, would you feel comfortable moving back into your home?
Look, I think that I would be drinking the bottled water, and I would be continuing to find out what the tests were showing as far as the air. I would be alert and concerned, but I think I would probably be back in my house.
I think that was a very good answer. Truly, I think the governor really summarized the important points. Look, we've got very good data as it relates to the air quality. And I think people can feel very confident in that fact, coupled with the fact that there continues to be air monitoring. So that's very good. We have no indication that the municipal water supply is not safe. However, we do have testing that is pending, and I think it's a relatively easy thing to do to use bottled water for a short window of time. I think people should be confident that multiple agencies, both at the state and the national level, are very serious about this, are watching very closely, and are not allowing any wiggle room when it comes to safety.
Our next question comes from Jordan Miller, WHBC Radio.
Hi, thanks for taking my question today. My question is, well, Norfolk Southern, are they going to pay for any autopsies for these animals that are being found dead? There's chickens that people are worried about. I know there's a report of a dog in the East Palestine area that has been circulating on social media. Is that something that people can confidently go to their vet for and turn over a bill, whether the vet determines that the animal, the livestock passed away because of the chemical releases, whether they determine that or not, can they rely on Norfolk Southern to handle that bill?
Director of Agriculture to answer that and to outline what the procedure is. There is a procedure built into our custom and into our law.
Thank you, Governor. As far as the question, as far as the Ohio Department of Agriculture, we have a diagnostic lab, and it is run by our state vet, Dr. Summers. And as far as the policy and what we're telling the folks, as far as the vets in the communities, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Summers, who's a specialist in that area.
Welcome. Thank you. Dr. Dennis Summers, State Veterinarian for Ohio. Yes, just in short, to answer your question, animals that die for any reason, livestock, pets, first call should be to your private veterinarian to seek guidance and consultation for that. Our animal disease diagnostic lab is here to serve the livestock industries and companion owners to do necropsies and diagnostic testing for any cause of death. So we need to make sure that we're following the appropriate routing, that those samples that are being submitted or those animals that may be found dead for any reason do come in through a veterinarian to our animal disease diagnostic lab, and we would run them like we would any other normal sample.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Our next question is from Dan DeRoos, WOIO in Cleveland.
Good afternoon, Governor. Thanks for taking the time for an update. The one thing that hasn't been discussed today is the giant column of doomsday-looking smoke that went up after the quote-unquote controlled release and burn. Are we just supposed to believe that that just disappeared, that went up into the atmosphere and just went away? That had to have come down somewhere. There has to be a blanket of whether it's soot or chemical, whether it was the wind sort of shifted that evening, so it kind of went instead of just to the south east, it kind of started to go straight east and then a little to the north. I mean, this has got to be on the ground somewhere. And if we're talking livestock, if we're talking pets, if we're talking kids out playing, there's no concern more than a mile out, 10 miles out, 20 miles out, 30 miles out. What happened to that smoke, and who can give those answers?
Let me see who can, if we've got someone who can answer that. I don't think there's anyone here who's volunteering, so. And look, what we're trying to do is be very, very careful, follow what the science is. I don't know what the science is in regard to that. But we'll try to get you an answer. If we can't get it today, we'll try to get you an answer later. So I will say the only thing I can say for sure is that we were monitoring the air. And this was a relatively small area that we had cordoned off and told people that they need to leave. We were monitoring the air in real time when that went up in the area right outside there. And that quality of air remained good the entire time. We later, the next day, went in, of course, within that area, the red area and the yellow area. But at the moment when it went up, we were still getting readings. My understanding is they're still getting readings right outside that area that indicated that it was good. But I cannot answer your question. What happens when that goes up? We'll see if we can get you an answer.
Governor, this is Kurt. I could add to that. Following the fire and the predicted plume, various communities did report odors or haze, and teams from both US EPA and all did respond to those areas throughout the night to verify them. And again, no elevated readings did occur for those constituents. So that did go on throughout any of the areas where citizens were reporting problems outside of East Palestine.
Our next question is from Deanne Johnson, Youngstown Business Journal.
Yes, Governor. Real quick, the soil that is along the tracks, I'm hearing that they're talking about they're excavating it and pulling it out of there. Twofold question, the trains continue to go through. Is that safe to have those trains still going through there if things are a little unstable? And secondly, where is all this soil going? There's talk of things that are sitting in East Palestine Park in large containers. Is that where the soil is being transported?
Let me ask Kurt if he knows.
Yes, the soil that is being excavated out there's three staging pads on site within the footprint of the spill zone. Underneath those are heavy plastic sealed liners with berms. Any water from either leaching out of the soil or anticipated rain would be collected on a continuous basis. So that soil is being managed. It will be properly analyzed and shipped off for disposal. So that's what's going on in that. As far as train safety, Norfolk Southern has made us aware we have to do all their safety briefings when working in those areas. They have complete control over the tracks. So anytime a train is coming through, it comes through at a reduced speed and the work has to stop while a train passes. So they have complete control over that. The wastewater storage, those big blue mobile storage tanks, they do hold 21,000 gallons capacity. We have them at various staging areas, depending on the work locations, like the one you referenced in the park is in the event we would have to pump material from the creek into those. Again, they are safe, they're sealed off. You don't have any direct access to the material inside. And they also inside secondary containment in case something would happen to those containers. So that's how waste is being managed on site. And we work with Norfolk Southern daily on that to monitor. When we have people from our hazardous waste unit group working with them directly, again, boots on the ground every day.
Okay, our final question today is from Dylan Carr, the Ashland Source.
Hi, thanks for taking my question here. We have readers in Ashland, Richland, and Knox counties, and they've expressed concern in the air and water quality in the aftermath of this. How concerned, if at all, should these people be? And if they should be concerned, even just a little bit, what steps should they take in terms of obtaining testing kits or anything like that?
We'll start with the surface water. As you saw from the maps that we showed, the surface water is heading southeast to the Ohio River. So the locations that you mentioned should not receive any contaminated surface water in their area, but I'll let Dr. Vanderhoff talk about the air.
Yeah, I think that they can feel very confident. Again, we have to think about the dilutional effects that happen as well as the predominant winds. I would not consider those communities to be at high risk. And again, we've been very careful about the water. We will learn more as we are doing the surrounding private water well testing. But again, their underground water sources are not in the zone that we would expect to be affected.
We've had a request for you to repeat the number. If
Oh,
someone was
yes.
testing.
Yeah, sure. I do have that. And I put my notes away, so let me grab it here. It is 330. Let's see here. Oh, here it is. Sorry. 330 849 3919. I'll do that one more time. 330 849 3919.
Anybody else?
Find positive tests in private wells, will that be public?
Yes.
Yes, I can assume so. Yeah.
Anybody else?
How soon are we estimating people will have to get that bottled water?
So a part of the challenge is people signing up. This is a voluntary activity. So if you've got a private water system and have not called the number to get on the list to get tested, please do. The turnaround time does not appear to be long, but it is a matter of days. So we'd like people to sign up for that testing in that area as soon as possible.
This is related, but related, I guess. There were reports that you were not necessarily looking at any sort of action regarding the adjutant general and the reporter who was arrested. Is there going to be anything after this?
Well, as you know, this matter is turned over by the local county prosecutor to the attorney general. I remain, have the same opinion I had the first day, and that is that I would hope that charges would be dropped. I think that would be the best thing. Whatever happened after the general walked away, the reality is that the reporter should not have been stopped, period. So it shouldn't even started that way. And I understand, people may have different feelings about what happened afterwards, but the initial stop, the initial confrontation, or the initial contact never should have occurred. So taking that into consideration, it seems to me that everyone would be better off if we just, if the attorney general could see fit not to proceed with any kind of prosecution. Yes. Yes. Look, I think the general, regrets that. I explained to him, how press conferences work, and that frankly, that sometimes during a long press conference, someone will be reporting directly. Someone could be right now standing back there and reporting if they wanted to, and they have the right to deliver the news however they want to deliver the news. So yes, we've had a conversation, and he regrets the whole situation. So. We will continue to keep you apprised. We don't plan at least on doing a press conference every day. What we do plan on doing is every day, at least once a day, release the information, any new information that we have. So you can expect that to come from the governor's office. You can expect that to come as a kind of a day's summary of what is going on. That does not mean there won't be other information that's posted in different forms, but coming out of the governor's office, we're going to try to summarize it once a day, get it to you in time so that you can utilize that. So thank you all very much.